to you and just excited to talk about this. I feel like it's funny because I feel like we have so many things that go on, like on the back end of our business that I just feel like I don't, and I'm not always great at talking about the specifics of. With clients, yes, but on like live streams and trainings, like sometimes I just don't always share those exact specifics. And so I'm excited for this live stream in particular because I really want us to get into some of the like very specific like data points we use and strategy we use and what it looks like. I was just showing one of my clients our spreadsheet from the last launch team, and she was like, "This is genius! Oh my God!" And so I think it'll just be helpful to be able to talk everyone through that too. So I always do this to you, but I think everyone knows who you are, but just tell them who you are.
That's cool. It's cool. It's
Hi,
good practice for
Elise.
me,
Hi,
right?
Claire.
So hi everybody. I am Megan Schopieray. I am the COO of A Little Life, and I also run my own company called the White Space Team, where I am an OBM for online entrepreneurs. And basically, my team and I help run all the things behind the scenes of businesses. And so my team and I primarily responsible for basically like all of the day-to-day operations and just kind of making things run like from start to finish behind the scenes.
Co-sign.
Yeah.
I was at one of my clients' events this weekend, and she gave a cute little thing at the end and was like, "I would be dead without you." And it was like so adorable. And then I think about like, well, I would be dead without you. So it's just this like beautiful ripple effect, right?
Which then, and then like I would be dead without my team. So it's like we're
Yep.
all like ripple down effect kind of thing.
I think that's
I
so
love
cool.
it.
Yeah, totally. It's so beautiful that feeling of like that's how supported we can make each other feel, and that's how well it can work together, right? And so that's what we want to talk to you guys about today is we'll talk to you mostly about our previous podcast launch because that I think we have the most data on basically. This new one is just starting. We're actually launching season 2 on Wednesday. I had to think about that for a second. On Wednesday. So we'll talk to you primarily about the last one, but we'll certainly incorporate this one too. And then any and all questions you have, like we're open books about it. Sometimes it's just so innate to us that we almost forget to share pieces. So if you have specific questions, like we're super happy to answer those too. But we're basically just going to walk you through the mindset, strategy, and execution of the launch because that's what I believe everything is tied to, and it really is how we run our business. Like it's not just something I talk about, like it's sincerely the way we run things and think about things. So let's talk mindset. Tell me what your thought is, because I feel like we have like a very specific, almost like, I guess I'll say like company culture, but like, around this, right?
Yeah, well, it was funny because when I was like making my notes earlier today, I was like, basically all of my points are kind of gonna mimic a previous live stream that we did, and I don't remember which one it was, but I think it was like the rules for Lit Up
Our
Life
business
one.
rules. Yeah.
And yeah, because I feel like so much of that is just the way that we approach everything, which makes sense, right? So the way that we approach one thing is the way that we approach everything in the business. But I think it's so true. So the first thing that comes up for me around mindset with the podcast launch is just that we kind of adopt this idea of nothing's an emergency. And I feel like that in and of itself just creates so much ease around the process on all ends, right? Like for you in the creation of it, for me in the like organization and management of it, and for the entire team when all of the like little pieces that we're executing on. I feel like just this idea and just this concept of nothing's an emergency is so supportive in the feeling of it being very easeful and like still purposeful and still having deadlines and moving forward and all of that. But just having so much ease around the process of it.
I just couldn't agree more. Like, and for everyone listening and watching, like, it totally depends on your personality a little bit, I think, because I have some clients who create a lot of emergencies and in some odd way it works for them sometimes. But like, for me, like, I cannot function like that. I am not my best when I am like in emergency mode or panic mode, or when I'm making a lot of things feel really important that aren't. So like, I think that's a question that we filter stuff through a lot, is like, how do we make this a non-issue or a non-emergency? Like, I've had promotional posts that I've been supposed to have finalized and reviewed for like a while. And through the lens, and I had a busier weekend than I really intended to. And so through the lens of, how do I not make this an emergency? I just sent Megan a message and was like, listen, you guys are amazing. I trust you. Just post them, assume they're finalized. Like, instead of being like, oh my God, it's emergency that Sunday night when I get home, I review these things. No, Sunday night when I get home, I'm sleeping. So in the vein of it not being an emergency, like, we're all good, right? And so those posts got to go out. Megan was sick last week, so she sent me an email like, hey, we're sending out this email. It's not an emergency. Like, if you want to review it, review it. If you don't, don't. Like, we really try to function through that lens in everything that we do, where it's not like, it's not a problem that I had a busier weekend than I intended to, because nothing's a fucking emergency, right? Claire said that used to be how I was, and now it's like never an emergency. Ease is all I accept now. Totally. It's just a mentality, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah,
decision.
it's really interesting too, because I feel like, yeah, 100%. I feel like, going back to how I functioned like in college, it was like everything had to be an emergency in order for me to follow through on it.
Yeah.
Where I was like, yeah. And now I'm like completely the opposite, where if I feel a ton of pressure around something and putting a ton of like, just like tension around it, I'm just not showing up as my best. Like, I might still get it done, but it's not going to be my best work. And so the entire like framework, just shifting my mindset around it to be just like, how can I make this not an emergency? How can I relieve the pressure from the situation? And usually it's not a big shift. It's just an important one for me to just frame it differently so that I'm showing up differently. And I think it's true for like the entire team.
Yeah. And in a launch of anything, we're always thinking about that question. We're always asking each other that question. Like, before we even went into this new season, I knew Megan was traveling. I knew I was traveling multiple weekends in a row. And so we both were like, can we execute on this without it feeling stressful, without it feeling pressured, and without it being emergency? We decided yes. But if the answer was no, 100% we would have pushed the launch. Like, we're never in that mentality of like, oh, and if it doesn't happen today, it's awful, or we're missing out on something, which I think is not only it's not an emergency mindset, but the reason it's so important to me is because it's an abundance mindset. There's an abundance of time. There is an abundance of opportunities. And that's really how we come at everything. Like, if it doesn't launch this week, it'll launch next. If, you know what I mean? If this person doesn't join the launch team, this person will. Like, we really try to keep an abundance mindset. And for me, that's directly tied to the emergency thing, because I'm not trying to live in the like, there is a shortage of time, there is a shortage of people, there is a shortage of money, or anything like that mentality, because it just doesn't serve me. Like, to Megan's point, like, it's fine, I suppose, but number one, it just has never gotten me what I wanted the most. So that's pretty much the deal, right? So good. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add like kind of another mindset piece that I think both of us really adopt in our launches, but also kind of ties into like the timing piece and all of that, is just the idea that everything works out perfectly for us. Like, I know that you talk about that, and that's one of like your like key things always. That has always been a thing for me for a long time. And I feel like we talk about how well things just work out for us because we kind of have adopted that as our mindset and kind of chosen that as a little bit of like an affirmation for us that everything works. If it didn't launch this week and we had to launch it next week, cool. It works out perfectly.
That would have been the perfect
way that it could work out. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true.
So I think that like kind of both of those together.
Hey, Lorianne. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about that forever and ever, but like, I feel like it's a chicken and egg situation, because we reinforce that so much, and we say that to each other all the time. Like, we'll even say that in conversations. Everything works out perfectly for us. It will be fine. Right? Because we have that mindset and mentality. It does, but also we take that frame to everything. If we have to move it, if something feels hard, if something isn't going how we want it to go, like that's the place I'm going is, well, this must be happening for a reason because everything always works out perfectly for me. So like clearly this is in my favor, right? So
Yeah.
super important. Let's talk strategy. I'm going to try to get really specific here, but basically our strategy is that the launch team is the launch when we're thinking of a podcast. And so when I see other people launch something like a podcast or whatever, so often what I see is them using all of their kind of like strength and intention to promote it. And what I really do and what I teach my clients to do is you leverage the communities you've already built and you pour into them so that they promote it for you. Because I can spend the rest of my life in business promoting my podcast, but I have a short window of time where I can like make a request of the community I built to help support me in getting it out there and give them like really amazing incentive to. So basically the 2 weeks before and the 2 weeks after we launch the podcast, I'm going to share it some, but the entirety of my focus is on our launch team sharing it and them feeling really supported and them feeling really incentivized. And I think that's why we have had and will have successful podcast launches, because we make it about that instead of just about like just me going out there and grinding on sharing it, right?
Yeah, and I think that like, so one of the important things around that is really like finding like one, incentivizing the launch team to share it. I think that obviously like it's one of those things where it is so good that I think people would want to share it anyway, but really making sure that we're asking exactly for like asking for what we want, right? Asking, here's swipe copy, here's graphics. We'd like you to share like in this way and leave a review, and really especially asking for reviews and stuff like that, and just being very specific about what we're requesting rather than like, oh, if you feel like it, you know, share or something, you know, like, I don't know.
No, it's so true. Like we are very clear. We're like, the first thing we want you to do is this. This is the most important thing. The second thing we want you to do is this. The third thing we want you to do is this. And we even tier our prizes based on that. And so there's no lack of clarity. And I think that's so important in launching something like this, because people fundamentally do want to support you, which is a side note that I'll go to in a second. But nobody knows what you want necessarily. Like one of my clients just had a TEDx talk. And so we're trying to be really clear about like, this is exactly how we want you to support us in that. Like the YouTube platform is the most important platform for us here. We want you to go here. We want you to like here. We want you to comment here. Like they don't know that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just like not something they inherently know. And so that specificity and like how they can help you is so important. But the tangent to that is have like we're so long-term game oriented at a Lit Up Life, but it's like have a community that wants to support you is also a really strong strategy. Like you guys know I'm going to be here every week. I'm going to pour into this community. I show up in this community multiple times a day, every day. Like, so then when I have an ask, I know you guys want to support me because it feels like an even energy exchange. Instead of like, I only show up when I need something or want to sell something, like having that community and building that tribe that like gets so much from you that they want to give back is the strongest strategy you could have, really, right?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that it's one of those things like, again, like going back to it is something that we have always worked on building that foundation and building those relationships. And it is a long-term game plan where it's not just like, oh, we are just like from day one launching a podcast and expect like people who barely know who you are to be sharing it, right? Like you have built for a really long time. And so it's like anything that you do at this point is going to be supported because of those relationships, because of what you've poured into the community.
Totally. And then of course we're going to pour back too, right? Like we're going to give you prizes. We're going to make it worth your while. We're going to make it you know, like a total no-brainer. Like I think the last time I gave away like a ton of shit, I gave away a 90-minute one-on-one intensive with me. I gave away my entire value-centered sales course. I gave away a business building bundle. I gave away like every mini course I have. I doubled down. Like I wasn't like, oh, like it would just be cool if you supported me. I was like, here's it all. This is how much it means to me. Like, please help me with this. And I think that it shows like that's like I'm willing to continue to engage in that even exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maggie says hi and yes to having a lit up community. Totally, it matters so much. And I think you guys are who the podcast is launching for. Like you guys are the whole reason I have a podcast, right? You're exactly why I'm doing it. And you're the exact people I want to listen. And so like I want you to feel like there's a win for you in that, an incentive in that, right?
Yeah.
I think I already said this, but really specifically, so our goal in a podcast launch is to spend a couple weeks usually building a launch team and like really focusing hard on getting people to opt in, getting them excited about the prizes, making sure they know what the incentives are, making sure they know what the rules are. And then when the podcast launches, spending 2 weeks giving that team everything they need to go out and share. After that, then we go back to like normal promotion and we promote the podcast really consistently every week. But I just can't say enough about how much we focus on the team during that like heightened launch period. And that's where I feel like most people go wrong. And I've done it with so many clients and I just see it work, not just for us, but like for them so well over and over again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, yes, you can do it on your own and you will do your own promotion, of course, because it's your podcast. But when you are, and this applies to like, you know, any big thing that you're launching probably too, right? But like, I feel like when you have a community who's there, who's going to be exciting, you're sharing it with them, just asking them to also participate in that, just, I mean, doubles, triples your efforts, right? And so I think that it just makes sense.
Totally. Like we hit new and noteworthy for literally for our first podcast launch. And I will tell you hands down, that didn't have shit to do with me. Like that had everything to do with the fact that I had a launch team that was pushing people to listen to that. Like I wouldn't have gotten on new and noteworthy without that. I'm so clear on that. You know what I mean? Megan's like, well, it actually did have shit to do with me. No, I'm kidding.
No. I have like, you hold on 1 second. Alexa, stop.
What did she do?
I have her play music for me when it's the end of the day, and I totally forgot about it.
That's so nice. I like that. Fun hack. Have Alexa play music for you at the end of the day, courtesy of Megan Schopieray.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, like the reason we got that result and the reason that like that happened was because of the team. Like I think that's just, you just can't stress that enough. Naomi wants, how do we help our clients understand the importance of community building? They don't get this. They expect things are just going to happen. That's a great question, Naomi. Yeah. I would say it's sort of the difference, and Megan and I talk about this a lot, but between like short-term and long-term thinking. So I would just help them like think a little bit from more of a long-term strategy, and you can maybe like provide and ask questions around that. But like, well, what's the long-term plan with the podcast, or what's the long-term strategy we're going for here, or whatever. And then you can kind of almost help work them back from that. Like I knew when I built my business, it was like a long-term game plan where I wanted like a community and I wanted a long-term business and whatever. So like having a group and a community that I built up over time totally made sense. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs don't get that. They're thinking very, very short term. What's the next thing that's going to make me money? What's the next thing I have to launch? What's the next thing? And so I think like in your position, just asking some of those more like long-term oriented questions could be really useful. But Megan, I would be super curious. I don't know if you know what Naomi does, that they have like a service-based agency model too. So
yeah, I think that like one of the things that would be important to kind of communicate to your clients too would probably be like how it is when you start to create community and start to build relationships, conversion rates start to go up sales become easier and repeat sales are going to end up just building upon themselves. And so like, yes, it kind of is a longer term game plan, but ultimately like that is what's going to expedite growth, is having that foundation and being able to like basically just, you know, like have those repeat customers and have sales just become easier because you've nurtured an existing audience.
That's really funny that you said that, because that's so true. Like community heightens conversions. I was literally just having this conversation with a client, and she just had a massive launch. Like it was so amazing. She converted her entire list at 10%. Her entire list. Like I'm not talking like a conversion event list that got 10%. I'm talking like the totality of her list she converted at 10%. And I will tell you the exact reason, and it's because she fosters community really, really well, right? And it was a mastermind, so she was basically selling like a community-led program sort of thing too. And so like, again, hands down 100%, it just matters so much. And so I love that Megan brought it back to conversions, because that makes it more incentivizing for your client too, right? Is like that, but it's so that. Okay, what other strategy? One strategy that I was talking about earlier is that we basically let people self-report on our launch team. Like we trust our community implicitly, which goes back to like having a great community. Like, and we trust them to self-report. So we make like a beautiful, Megan makes a beautiful Google spreadsheet. It's very clear what the prizes are on the spreadsheet, and it's very clear what you have to do for each of them, and everybody self-reports. And the only way you can get the prize is if you self-report on this spreadsheet. That's wildly helpful for us because we don't have to go around tracking everything. One time, I think, I forget what it was for, but one time we tried to track and make sure people were sharing. And now we're like, we trust our community. We're not, who cares? It's fine. And it makes it so much easier. So whether you're doing like a launch team for like an article you have coming out, or a live stream series, or a podcast, or whatever, having a really clear, clean, easy way for people to self-report is fucking magical because it saves our team so much time. It saves us so much energy, and it makes people more excited because they see the other people reporting too. And so they can see like, ooh, am I close to getting to tier 5, or how many people might win that top prize or whatever. Like there's this fun aspect that happens with it too when you know what other people are doing, right?
Yeah, and I think that like it can be super simple. Like, I mean, it's literally just a Google spreadsheet that I share and like make editable.
If you want to see the spreadsheet, you should get on the launch team. Just saying.
alituplife.com/literally launch.
Also just saying, but you know, /literally launch.
Yeah. So, yeah, like make it super easy. And I think that that's kind of like one of our strategies, just, you know, generally speaking too, is like make it simple, make it straightforward, make it easy on us and on the launch team who's helping us promote the podcast, on like our team and the actual like execution of all the things on the back end that needs to get done. And so just like kind of making a super simple process, because we can always build on it.
It's so funny too, because I feel like people think that we have this like super complicated back end systems for everything. And I feel like we're constantly just trying to be like, what's the easiest fucking way we can do this? Like, I don't want to buy another tool. I don't want to make it complicated. Like what? And it's so funny because it's like, that's the constant question, is like, what's the easiest way we can do this? Right.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like almost everything is like a Google Doc, a Google spreadsheet.
Pretty much the whole game. Maggie says Megan makes magic. It's true. It's so true. Naomi says, oh my God, this is gold. Thank you. The self-reporting is so good. I've seen that spreadsheet and it's perfection. Thank you, Naomi. Yeah, it's like, I think for anything you're doing in your business, it just makes it so much easier. Like when I was showing it to my client earlier, that was her comment basically, was like, holy shit, this is so simple. Like I was about to make it so fucking complicated. And that's where we create that ease. And so it lets us put, and this is really important, you guys, it lets us put our time where it matters the most, which is actually supporting the team, which is making sure they have everything they need, which is like actually getting them the site copy and graphics and whatever, instead of like being behind the scenes trying to figure out all this complicated stuff, like we know what matters most. And so we want to like save as much time as we can to do those things, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that like kind of piggybacking off of that, and speaking of just like saving time and all of that, one of the things that has been really important for us going through the first launch was documenting everything
Yeah.
that we did and creating an SOP around the podcast
Yep.
launch. And so that this, you know, like I think that we had a conversation a couple weeks ago or something that you were like, hey, can we launch season 2 mid-November? And I was like, oh gosh, like almost had a heart attack. And then I actually thought about it and I was like, well, shit, this is going to be really easy because we have this process that basically we just have
Yep.
to tweak rather than starting from scratch. Like we're
Even
not
like
like
our
reinventing the
promo posts, like we
wheel.
save everything.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
I think it just like, well, I think it just makes it like, I think often what happens is teams and entrepreneurs think that like I have to sit down and create
Mm-hmm.
SOPs. Like that's a project, a side project that I have to do and dedicate
Yep.
time to. And here's the thing, it never fucking happens because you never have an extra like
Yeah.
hour in the day to just sit down and map out your SOPs. So my favorite thing to do is actually map them out, even if it's just super basic notes as you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it. And then every time that you go through it, just refining those notes more and more and more, because it eventually like creates SOPs that are super easy to follow and
It's so
straightforward.
true. Like for our partnership launch, we've done that, what, 4 or 5 times now, 5 times now. That SOP is
Mm-hmm.
on fucking point, but it's because we're 5 in. Like this launch one is good. It's about to be more on point. It'll be even more on point the next time. Like you know what I mean? Like I think that it's like sometimes people
Yeah.
aren't willing to let it evolve, and I think that's such a beautiful point that you just made, which is like SOP can sound so like, oh my God, it's this big project where I have to type everything out. And you're like, I literally just make notes of what we're doing while we're doing them.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and especially because I feel like because we're repurposing so much and because we save everything, like it becomes just so much
hmm
easier because again, like we're just taking what we have and building on it rather than starting
One of my
over.
clients recently, not a launch for a podcast, but she had a launch for something else. Um, and it was her second launch of this thing, and it was her first time ever having a second launch. Does that make sense? Like she launched other things, but it was her first time
Mm-hmm.
repeating a launch. And she was like, people need to know about this. Like, this is wild. Like, when you save shit and then you do it again, it is like insane. Like, I don't even know what to do with myself. And I was like, that's so true. Like, that's why my business has grown the way it has, because we just like reuse and repurpose and save everything. And that's why I have the level of ease that I do. And quite honestly, can make the level of income I make because I can take the amount of clients I want to take, because I'm not like rewriting 30 podcast promo posts. Like they're done for pretty much eternity, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that kind of another side tangent there is also like I feel like we've talked about this quite often in previous live streams as well, is but like knowing
Yeah.
what works and being able to know what works, what converts, what resonates with your audience, all of that, because then you can just basically like keep working that thing over and over and like getting better at it, right? Rather than like just constantly throwing spaghetti at the wall and never knowing exactly what's going on and changing up the strategy and changing up this and that. And so I feel like knowing what works,
Yep.
knowing, you know, what gets you clients, what, you know, what type of content resonates with your audience, all of that. And just like going over
Yeah.
and over and rinsing and repeating is just like so
So
valuable.
good. Nikki says, I think this is one of the things that makes you so innovative because you emphasize simplicity and don't let your clients' brains overcomplicate things. Yes, I'm very into that. Okay, so 2 things I want to talk about that you just pointed out, and I really would love to hear your thoughts on this, Megan, specifically the data piece. But I think we do that really well with the podcast with data. Like we look at the data and then we have a specific strategy for how we push people back through the podcast so that it continues to be successful past the launch. But secondarily, knowing what your audience likes. I know my audience loves behind the scenes stuff. They love the client files. If you don't know what that is, you should be on my list where I break down like client success stories and like exact case studies. And so I knew they would love this. And I think it's really important. I'm about to go off on a tangent for 2 seconds, but like all my clients, like, well, a lot of them, not all, joke with me about like, they love the Real Housewives or they love Vanderpump Rules or whatever. And like, I don't think reality TV has translated to podcasts except for like kind of like serial-ish and stuff, like where it's like a real thing that we're talking about. But like the so many of my people and so many people just in general, like love and consume reality TV. We love the behind the scenes stuff. We love whatever. And so knowing and paying attention to that, like I knew this podcast would do well. I knew people loved the client file stuff. Like I knew this would convert. And so I think that's an important point that Megan made too, which is like some of the strategy is do what works. This behind the scenes stuff works really well and you guys really love it. And I really love giving it to you. So win, 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 right? But share with us the data point stuff because I think that's been really important too.
Yeah. So, during season 1, I just basically was like tracking numbers, I think once a week or something like that. And to be honest, I don't even think that I knew exactly what to track or what to pay attention to. I was just like tracking
We
stuff.
were basically just
And
grabbing
then,
whatever data was available to us and like putting it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I noticed was that basically like within the first, I don't know, like week or not week, but like, first month of the podcast, that basically if somebody stuck through, I think it was like episode 3 or 4 or something like that of season 1, then the likelihood of them dropping off was like diminished significantly. Like the drop off rate was just like, I don't even remember, but like, I mean, single digit percentage type of thing.
It was like almost
crazy,
next to
crazy
nothing.
retention
Like we
rates.
had to like double check it because we were like, this is weird.
Yeah. So basically what that taught us was that like it was something that people were getting invested in. And once they got through, like if we could get them invested at least through episode like 3 or 4, then they would most likely finish the entire season, right? And just be super invested in the story and the process and all of that. And so what we, like one of our strategies was, yes, promote new episodes when they came out, but also always be promoting like either general promos or promos 1 through like episodes 1 through 3, so that we could get people to like new people started to listen to the podcast and making sure that they stuck with it through episode 3, because we knew that like we're not necessarily promoting episode 10 all the time, because that's not really like where we want to focus our attention. That's not really going to get people at the point that we want to get them at.
Yes, what I think is really important to note there is that our most popular episode was, I think, episode 9 or 10.
I think so.
And we don't push it because we see the client life cycle or customer life cycle, customer journey, right? Like, which is, of course, you'll get to episode 9 or 10, whatever that, most listened to one is, or most favorited one or whatever, if you listen 1 through 3. So even if number 1 wasn't like the best thing ever, like we're still pushing through that because we know the entirety, which is again, that long-term thinking instead of just like, people seem to really like and comment on episode 10, so let's push that. But like, we're missing the point because that's not the life cycle or journey that's most important to us, right? And so, I don't know, I think I may have misexplained that a little bit when I said most listened to. What I meant was like most commented on. Right? Like we got the most feedback on too.
And also I think that we got the most like, I think it was the most listened to maybe, or like within the, what was normal for those numbers, if that makes sense. And I think that like we had kind of like deduced that a lot of people listened to that episode more than once too. And so I think that was also just like a really important thing. But again, we're not pushing
Mm-hmm.
that episode all the time because we kind of know the experience as a whole. And I think obviously like this would be like not every podcast is going to be like this because not every
Right.
podcast is kind of like serial like this, like going in order. A lot of podcasts you can just listen to one single episode and that's totally
But I
fine.
will say it's some of the magic of this podcast too. And it's why we retain listenership so much. And it's why a podcast like Serial worked
Mm-hmm.
so well too, because of the retainment of listeners, where it's not like, well, I liked that one, but I don't need to listen to the second one. It's like it literally leaves them hanging
Mm-hmm.
kind of every time. So that's why I really think like the podcast space doesn't have enough of that right now, where it leaves you hanging, where it is a serial thing, where it is kind of that mentality of like you want to listen to the next one. And so we've just seen that pay off really, really well from a strategy perspective. There
Mm-hmm.
was something else I wanted to share there too. Oh, is basically like your launch isn't over. So like, yes, we do the 2 weeks of podcast promotion or podcast team promotion, and then the 2 weeks of podcast team launching. But like we keep paying attention to the data, like Megan said, and then we keep shifting our focus to support that. Like we are constantly pushing people back to episode 1, back to the podcast. Like my team came to me and was like, you need to do this update episode with Monica. I think it will be amazing. And we can push people all the way back to session 1 if they never heard it. And I was like, yeah, that's genius. Let's do it. Right. And so it's just so important to know like your journey, your life cycle, and to know that your launches aren't done. Like that's just the jumping off point, and then you get to take that data. So what is helpful is that we had an influx of data. Basically we take it and we do something with it. It's not like we have a launch, we have an influx of data, and then we'll just see what happens. And so it is like not making anything an emergency and making it all feel really easy, but also being willing to like look at what's working and like make decisions and changes and add to continuing to launch, right? Or you could just say share ongoingly in a way that pushes them into the right place, into the right way, because we have data that tells us what that is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I think that's why our numbers have been so good, because we've never once stopped pushing and promoting back to that first episode.
Yeah, like I think that how long of a break did we have? Like 2 months or something like that
2
of a
months.
break in between
Yep.
seasons. And I don't think a week went by where we weren't still, sharing different promos for the podcast, asking for reviews, asking for, people to like give feedback and all of that. And so I think that that's really important too, is like even if you're not releasing new episodes of your podcast, like you're still promoting it and you're still going back and going to what's the data telling me? What's the kind of long-term strategy here? And what should I be doing to get people invested in, whatever element of your
Right.
podcast
And that's
it
an
is,
important
right?
note too, is that I was very adamant and intentional about taking a 2 month break for the exact reason that I wanted those 2 extra months to also be pushing back. Like I could have started with Sam earlier. You know what I mean? I could have like kept right on going and we could have immediately released a season 2 and that would have been fine. But like I really wanted us to have that chunk of time to be like, are you caught up? Did you listen? Did you start? And it was so smart because number one, people are excited about it because they've had a break and they're like, oh, I miss hearing that. And number two, we captured so many more people in those 2 months that became long-term ongoing listeners because we took that chunk of time instead of like always being like on to the next. We took that chunk of time and very strategically put them through a journey that we knew was working, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I just noticed, I think it was like a couple days ago, you just got a new review on iTunes that was a woman who said, like, I just binge listened to it on a road trip. And it's like, I mean, I can't say for sure where she heard about it, but my guess is that it's because you're continuing to talk about it. You're continuing to share about it. And so it was top of mind. And so when she was on a road trip, she was like, cool, I'm going to listen to the whole thing. Right. And so I think that like that most likely would not have happened if the last time we promoted it was like beginning of September. Right. So I think
Or
that just staying
Or
top of
if we
mind.
had just gone straight into Sam, all of those amazing episodes
Yeah.
with Monica, which are just incredible, would have died really fast because it would have been like on to the next thing, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So good. Okay, so a couple things. We're launching literally again, obviously. So I just want you guys to know that you can join us. It's literally or alituplife.com/literally launch. And be on our launch team. There's like tons of prizes as always. I'm so grateful for your support. It is totally different this season, which by the way is also intentional because we want to keep people engaged in new and different ways. Definitely part of our strategy too. So season one, Monica was like, we were going from square one basically. She didn't have clients yet. Totally different. Season two, our amazing coachee Sam already has a 6-figure business. She's looking to scale that business. I just almost gave something away. I'm an idiot. We are scaling that business very effectively, is maybe how I'll say that. We're already crushing some of her goals. And she's adding a second arm to her business. And so it's just totally different thing, totally different experience. It's going to be amazing and you should join us. But also the reason I'm saying that too is like, again, there's strategy behind it. Like I intentionally went into season two going, how do I not just do the same thing? How do I do this in a different way? And for season three, we'll do that too. We'll pick somebody that's totally different as well. And I just think, we slowed down enough to be intentional. Like I had those 2 months to pick the right person, to really think about what I wanted it to look like, to really reflect on that. And we slowed down enough so that we can be intentional and strategic, right?
Yeah, and I even remember having conversations with you, going back to the whole mindset piece of nothing is an emergency. I know that your intention going into the application process was, if I don't find the right person by, the date that I have in mind right now, I'll just keep applications open for longer. Whereas like we can push back the date of the launch, like that nothing was set in stone. The important piece was finding the right person, and having the right, framework around that, rather than just like pushing it forward and just like go, 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 go.
Exactly. It's like intentional and strategic is so important. And like sometimes you have to slow down to do that. And that's not a bad thing. Like that can be a leverage point. And it doesn't mean you stop promoting. Again, we went back and promoted all of it, but like it's just like giving yourself that space and grace, right? So good. Okay, so literally launches November 13th. I'm so excited. I'm so pumped for you guys to meet Sam. Like, she is just like a firecracker. She has so much confidence. She is so smart. She just like, I think I spend half of my like recap clips being like, listen to how she's thinking about this. Listen to how she's talking about this. If you want to be a 6-figure business owner, this is the mindset you have to have. Like, it's going to be so fucking helpful. And I'm just so excited. And I think you guys are just going to fall in love with her too.
It's so good.
Thank
so
you.
good.
I say this every time, but I'm going to say it again. Megan does these because she is a goddess and cares about this community because she's been part of A Lit Up Life for a long time. Like she doesn't really get anything out of this. She just shows up every month for this community because she loves you guys and is behind the scenes taking care of you. And so just please give her so much thank you and so much gratitude because she is the wind beneath my wings here and just shows up for you guys in such big ways that you guys probably don't even know. So thank you for listening. Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you. And if you guys have any questions that we did not answer in here, just pop them in the comments. It will be in and out of the group and respond.
Totally. And I think I said this earlier, but for us, sometimes it just becomes so innate. So if there's any specifics we can get into, we're super happy to share any answers to any specific questions you guys have around this. Awesome. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate you. All right. Bye, guys.